pizza, two different types of wings. I got some barbecue wings, and they said on the label it was hot wings, but it looks more like teriyaki, but I could be wrong. I'll find out in a couple minutes. Got a buttered horn right here. Got some water. Good old plain water. Wow. Struggled to open that. Holy cow. Got a little bit of bubbly left. I was drinking one earlier. I'm just going to slide my chair over here a bit. There we are. Okay. So, Facebook. Remember Facebook? You know what's funny? I'd never heard of Facebook until the year 2007. And in early December 2007, I found out my marriage was ending. Very shocking, yada yada. Anybody that's been through a relationship breakup or a marriage, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. So anyways, of course, I was somewhat in shock. And so my ex and I basically kind of separated at that point. In other words, I started sleeping in the den on a futon where the computer was. And we just had this, like a desktop computer with the big white monitor and whatever. So I remember, I guess maybe she was feeling guilty or something or what, but a couple weeks went by and I came home from work one day and I was sitting on the computer and she comes up and she's got her hand sort of over my shoulder. She's looking, she says, I want to show you something you might be interested in. It might help you meet people and that sort of thing, and our friends are on there. And she named a bunch of our friends that were on there, this person, that person. I thought, okay, so she shows me Facebook. Now, I never heard of Facebook, like I said. I had heard of a thing called MySpace. I remember I was at work one time, I said to a coworker, what's this MySpace, what is that? And I remember I said, so what's this MySpace? And she said, it's like a social media thing. And the only reason I asked was I kept hearing about it. It's kind of like buzzwords, like, remember the first time you heard about Twitter or tweeting or whatever, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever, So, I'd heard of MySpace, didn't know what it was. I really didn't know what social media meant necessarily. Keep in mind, I was really not much of a computer person. We bought our first computer in 1988, and I was the last one to get on the computer. My kids are all on there. They were all experts, and my ex was on there. It wasn't until we got the internet that I actually showed some interest. Because prior to the internet, I didn't have a lot of use for a computer. You know what I mean? My ex bought me this thing called Encarta. It was like an encyclopedia thing I could look at, and that kind of intrigued me, but it was limited, obviously. So, once you got the internet, well, then I was able to look at more things. I could look at different coins, because I collect coins, and the real estate or different things, lots of stuff, right? So it was a whole new world. So, anyways, I was very naive about what social media was, or Facebook, or anything else. So she wanted to sign me up, so she did. She signed me onto Facebook, and like she said, our friends were on there. And so I took to it kind of right away, and I found it very easy to navigate and very easy to get around. I caught on right away. Now I know you're thinking, well, how hard can it be? Well, you're right, but like I just mentioned, I was not a computer person for years, and I was still just kind of becoming one, so I have to take a bite of this pizza. So, can't wait to eat my butter horn. So anyway, she signs me up, and I made friends with some of our friends that were on there and that kind of thing. And next thing you know, the odd person popped up, and they were like friend suggestions, kind of. Maybe they didn't even have friend suggestions back then, but I just saw different people, and I would just click on them, wanted to know if they wanted to be friends or whatever. I really didn't know what I was doing, but anyways, next time I started getting some friends and started meeting people, and it was kind of fun. You know, it was kind of exciting. It's like I had this whole new sort of social life, this whole new world kind of. You know, it was quite interesting, and it was kind of something to pass the time and take my mind off things. Because I mean, I was going to work. I was also going to school. I was actually I was getting my grade 12. That's what I was doing. I was getting my grade 12. I'd gone back to school to get my grade 12 because I never finished high school. So, right in the midst of all this, I'm going through a divorce. Or was separated at that point anyway. So, I remember I started meeting people. And she signed me up on December 26th, 2007, day after Christmas. And so, like I said, you know, I started meeting people right away. And I was connecting with my friends on there. And I remember back in those days, they had these apps. People would send you these apps, like, you know, that it'd be like a hi or a wave or a hug or a kiss or something, you know. And people would send you these apps and pokes. I guess they still have the pokes. I don't poke anybody. I've known them for years, but they still have the pokes. But remember, people poke each other, and then they'd send apps, like send you a hug or something, or, you know, like, how was your day, or whatever, right? Something like that. And I thought that was pretty cool, nice way to meet people, even though it was online, because my world was kind of suddenly shattered. I felt I just needed to talk with people. I remember meeting this person. She popped up. Her name was, I'll just say her first name. Her name was Lily. She lived in Jordan, and I remember. I knew that was somewhere like close to Turkey and those places, and so we started chatting, and she said, "Well, do you want a webcam?" And I said, I don't know how to do that, so I got my son to show me. So he plugged the webcam in, and back then all you could do was type, and then you'd see the picture, and then but whenever I typed, the picture would go off, and it was kind of weird, but fine. We got it working, so I could watch this person. I could type, and we'd type back and forth, and she was quite funny. She would put on a record, and she would sing to it like this, right? I couldn't I couldn't hear the music, but she'd be singing away, and you know, it was, and then somehow I think she got the music working where I could hear it. I can't remember, but it was just really quite entertaining. She was very funny, and she was, you know, she really got me through a few dark days. You know, it was just really a lot of fun. She was a school teacher, and this kind of thing, and but anyways, that you know, there was nothing ever developed out of that, obviously. I mean, but it was just, you know, I was meeting people that were making me laugh, and I needed to smile and laugh at that point. I really did. And then I met this lady named Elise from South Africa, and we'd start talking. I would eventually meet her sister Amanda online, and I would eventually meet her in person. But Elise was from South Africa, as was her sister, and we got talking. And I found it very interesting that I was talking to people from all over the world. People from Jordan or South Africa, you know, and different places. And that was just so cool to meet with people online and just talk with them, you know. So barbecue wing, not bad. So it was totally cool. I was enjoying it so much that the minute I got home from work, I would log on. Now, we just had that computer in the den. My ex had just bought a laptop shortly before that. And my kids had a computer in the basement, so I was pretty much free to use this computer as much as I wanted for the most part. But I was enjoying it so much that I'd go to bed at night. I'd wake up around midnight, and I'd get on the computer and look to see if I had any notifications or anything, or messages or comments. And when I would would see that, just be so exciting. You know, it's like, wow, you know, I have this online, you know, life kind of, right, you know, which I never had before. It was very exciting. Please keep in mind, it was in a very dark period of my life. So that all helped. So I eventually met this lady on there. Her name was Bev from New Zealand. Can't remember exactly. When or where or how she popped up. We just got talking. She was a few years older than me. At that time I was 50. I think she was 54 or something. She's from New Zealand. Married with grown kids. Magnetic personality, very charismatic. I liked her immediately. So we chatted quite a bit, and she basically said her husband wasn't interested in chatting online, and she chatted with different people, which she was, and she was chatting with another guy in Canada, in Eastern Canada, in Ontario, who she would eventually meet. And they would become kind of like, you know, long-term boyfriend-girlfriend type thing, even though she was married. They kind of had an old marriage, but I'll get into that later. But Bev was a wonderful person. I still see her online. I still send her the odd comment here and there, you know, when it's her birthday or, you know, something nice, you know, or if she posts a picture, I comment on it, you know. But lovely, lovely woman, and I would really credit her to getting me through some real dark times. These are not hot wings, these are teriyaki. They were mislabeled. Or no, pardon me, they're garlic. I'm sorry, garlic honey. Honey and garlic. But they're not hot. So we would chat a lot every day. And webcam, and you know, and I was getting better at the webcam thing, so we'd just type away, we'd look at each other, and type some, laugh, and you know, this kind of thing. And she wanted to see if she could get my wife and I to reconcile. I said, that's highly unlikely. She said, well, can I talk to your wife, my ex-wife at the time, or it is now. And I said, sure. So they started talking, and you know, she was very polite, but you know, didn't really ask any questions. Just wanted to, I guess, meet her and see what she was like. But anyways, I was kind of afraid that her and my ex would become good buddies, good chat buddies, and then I'd kind of be out in the cold. But that never happened, fortunately. And I think she kind of realized that. And she said, well, you and I were friends first, right? We'll always be friends. And we did become very good friends. Yeah, she was, you know, even though she was so far away, it seemed like she was like next door, you know. And it seemed that way with people online. They could be, you know, 3 days away by jet, and it seemed like they were just down the street. You know, it was really cool. And I couldn't wait to get home from work. Chat with some of these people. The funny thing is, people from work, and I was amazed at how many people were on Facebook, you know, and like it was like I was the last one to get on there. That's how it felt. But it was amazing, like people from work. I could chat with them online, but when I see them at work, we'd already say 2 words to each other, you know. It was really kind of funny. We'd already say anything, but yet online we'd be chatting So anyways, I said, Bev, and I talked for a long time, kept talking. And so I started meeting other people on there. I met a lady named Lynn who lived in a neighboring town. And her and I would go on a date. We'd actually go on a date. She lived in a neighboring town, and I saw some pictures and all that. And we started chatting, and so we agreed to go on a date. So this is my first date as a newly single guy, I guess, even though I was still legally married, and I was still sharing a house with my ex. We were basically separated. So we went out on a date. So I met her online, and I still see her on Facebook the odd time. We never chat anymore, but I might see something, I'll comment. And she eventually did meet some guy. They were together for a while, and he passed away, but he was very good to her. They had a lot of good times. But she was a nice lady. So it was kind of nice, it really opened up doors, because prior to that, I would have had a hard time meeting people, and I was socializing way more online than I was in my real life, which is kind of weird. But, it was just kind of a weird thing. It was very new to me. By then, it was probably old hat to a lot of people, but to me, it was really new, and I really embraced it. And I still say, I don't want to say, may lightning strike me down for saying this, but Facebook saved my life. I know that sounds corny, and what I mean by that is, I was in a very dark place. And I guess what it was is, it was kind of like I was in a dark cave, and Facebook was a flashlight. I was able to find my way out of this dark cave by this guiding light, so to speak. It gave me something to focus on. I was able to meet people, some of which I would meet in real life. And it was kind of cool. And I mean, eventually my ex and I would separate out. I moved out of the house, and we eventually sold our house and got divorced. And I stayed on Facebook, but never knew what happened to Lily. She just kind of fizzled out. Not sure what happened to her. We lost track of each other, which is kind of too bad, but because she was funny. She was a lot of fun. Often wondered how she's doing. Now, at least in South Africa. She introduced me to somebody named Amanda. I didn't know they were sisters. Amanda told me, you know my sister Elise. I said, I didn't know that was your sister, so we started talking. I eventually met a few other women. Chatted with a few guys too. This one lady, Dawn, she's from Vancouver, and we would eventually meet. That summer we would meet. She came over, had lunch together. It was nice to meet people for real. But that fall, after talking to Amanda for a long time, she was from South Africa as well, just out of Johannesburg. She had a son in California, just outside Los Angeles. And she was going there to stay with him for a while. She really needed a holiday. And her husband was like a trial separation thing, but she thought she really wanted to see her son. She hadn't seen her son since he got married years earlier. And she hadn't seen the grandkids and this kind of thing because he had 2 boys. So she was going to be there in Los Angeles. And so we decided to meet. So in the fall of 2008, I flew down to LA. Her and her son picked me up at the airport. I had a motel. So Amanda and I hung out for a week. Fantastic vacation. It was a much needed vacation for me. It really was. Good wings. So we went to Disneyland one day. Her son drove us there, and he lent me his truck, and we drove around. Went to a couple of islands. We had a really good time together for that week. It was a vacation we both needed. After the week, I came back to where I live on Vancouver Island, and she eventually that summer went back to South Africa. Her and her husband got back together. Her and I kind of stayed in touch. We played Farmville together. That's one thing about Facebook I really got into was Farmville. I don't remember Farmville. I really got into that. So Amanda and I played a lot of Farmville. We'd harvest each other's crops and this kind of thing. Really got into that Farmville thing. So Facebook was still kind of my friend. It was, it was always there for me, And even when I moved out of the house and got my own place, I was trying to get back my feet. I was forcing myself to go out and meet people. I was actually dating some of the women from work, just a couple of women from work. But I was still relying very much on Facebook to kind of, get me through those dark times, kind of, A lot of times I come home from work in the dead of winter, and it's, I'm all alone, the lights are off, it's cold in there, and, I'd log onto Facebook, and I'd just be there until 11 o'clock at night, and that was like, I wouldn't even have the radio on the TV, it would just be like the computer. Be playing Farmville and chat with Amanda or whoever else. Like I said, Amanda eventually went back to South Africa. Never see her online anymore. I guess she's there, but I guess when you don't maintain contact with people, they just kind of, you don't see them, they're not really in the loop anymore, I guess, I remember Bev from New Zealand. Every once in a while she would send me a package. She used to send me these things called pineapple lumps. And she would send me candy and stuff. These pineapple lumps were amazing. I loved them. And she would send me some souvenirs and a few different things, some coasters and stuff, just to let her know that she was thinking about me. And that made me feel great, I remember at one point she'd come over to visit this guy she was seeing, or that she had a relationship with in Ontario, and they had met. And she had posted some pictures. She was at Tim Hortons and this kind of thing, and, was posing with a Mountie and, doing all this Canadian stuff, right? It was kind of funny. But anyways, I remember this one night I came home, I'd gone back to school, and it was winter time, and I'd gone back to school, and I was struggling. I mean, I did very well in school, but it was very intense. It was a lot of work. I was taking the Carried course, and I came home, and I was just, oh man, I was just kind of beat, and there was a package for me. I opened it up, it was from Bev, and it was some pineapple lumps, a nice little letter, saying, just thinking about you, blah, blah, blah. And I remember how much that picked me up, and made me realize how a lot of these people online are real, even though they don't seem real. They say you can have 1,000 Facebook friends, but no real friends. remember seeing a cartoon once where this guy, I think the gist of it was he was in heaven looking down at his own funeral. And there's all these empty seats, except for 4 or 5 people on these empty seats. And he's saying, but I had over 1,000 Facebook friends, But he didn't have any real friends, or very few, That was kind of the gist of it. So, meeting some of these people for real, because I'd met, up to that point, 4 or 5 people for real. So, I mean, I knew that these were actually real people from different countries. And it was so cool, Even if I didn't meet them, just chatting with them online was just wonderful. Just having a conversation. Like talking on the phone or something. So eventually I would meet Bev from New Zealand. Her and this guy. I'm trying to think of his name. He's a lovely man. Anyways, they decided to meet in Vancouver. He flew up from Ontario, arrived in Vancouver. She from New Zealand, flew from New Zealand to Vancouver. They met there. They were there for about a week, and I came over to see them. Hung out for the day, went out for dinner. It was wonderful. Brad, his name was Brad. He passed away maybe a year ago, year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. But it was just kind of weird when he passed away because I didn't even know he was sick, so. But he's only about my age, maybe a year older, so. Now, of course, Facebook. It's not all what it used to be. Gone are the days of, the friendliness and sending people hugs and all that. It seems to be more of a platform for politics. You see a lot of hate on there, which is unfortunate. A lot of politics. A lot of videos, a lot of clickbait, I'll see a video and says, this lady's walking down the street, then this happened. It's like, I fell for that a few times. Eventually started to learn. Now I still look at Facebook every day because I play Words with Friends. I play that a lot. I think Farmville is now extinct. But, I've maintained relationships with people, but I've connected with a lot of relatives I haven't seen in a dog's age. I have a lot of cousins, that sort of thing. Endless amounts. So it's been nice to reconnect with a lot of those people. Even though I haven't seen them in over 50 years, it's nice to actually see their pictures and this kind of thing and kind of chat a little bit. 2016, I started a Facebook page for the logging camp I used to work at. But I have a lot of pictures on my Facebook. A lot. Mostly my travels. family and all that. I still remember my first profile picture. I kind of cut it out of one with me and my ex together. I kind of cut mine out. And some of the first pictures I posted were of my kids and I camping. Remember one time, a couple of years ago, I sent Bev from New Zealand, I sent her a note, basically telling her what I just told you, that going through my divorce, I was really in a dark place, and she really pulled me through that, and I'll never forget her for that. I remember a number of years ago when she came over to see Brad, she was telling me her and her husband kind of have an open marriage, and that Bev and her husband and her husband's girlfriend went to an AC/DC concert. Kind of funny. But I think they're back to being a steady couple now, because they're older. I mean, they're in their 70s, and whenever I see pictures, it's always her and her husband, and their adult kids, the grandkids, and kind of funny. I did meet her and Brad. She just looked exactly like I expected she would, but of course she had her, what she calls her Kiwi accent. But she was so nice. I had so much fun. I think she's very happy for me that Linda and I have now been in a steady relationship since 2014. And I was never wondering, I was always wondering, I was never sure if I'd ever get to this place again, you always wonder will you ever meet anybody again. Now I spend a lot of time playing Words with Friends. But I click the like button on the people that actually know, for the most part. Like some Halloween pictures or some trip they went on or something. But Facebook is not what it used to be. I've grown very tired of it in some aspects because it's so political. It's not the warm and fuzzy place it used to be. It was warm and fuzzy at one time. Not so much anymore. no longer feel the need to connect online like I used to because I'm in a good solid relationship. And prior to my divorce or separation, whatever, I had no desire to chat with people online. I never did. I've often wondered, had it not been for my separating from my wife and ultimately getting divorced, how long would it have taken me to get onto Facebook? Because eventually I probably would have. Like I said, I never even heard of it. Never even heard of it. I will say one thing about Facebook. It did. I went from somebody who could take or leave the computer. You know, if I came home from work, that was not the first thing I did. The first thing I did usually was have a cup of coffee. Nice day. I'd go sit outside. I just chat with the kids or my ex or just whatever. Find something to go out to my shop and tinker around. Once I got into Facebook, it's like I became addicted to it. It was kind of weird. I mean, we'll hear about people being addicted to the internet, Figuratively speaking, I mean, it's really not an addiction, it's just habit forming. Got something hard there. Almost broke my tooth on it. I stay in touch with my kids through Facebook a lot. I was just chatting with them this morning, actually. My son in Vancouver on Facebook. My mom a number of years ago was briefly on Facebook, but she was never a computer person by any stretch. She tried, I'll give her that. And now, of course, her eyesight is failed so bad she can't even see the computer, never mind read what's on it. But she was always really, in her words, taken with the idea of, being in contact with all these people back in the province of Saskatchewan, where I was born, where, she lived for many years, where she was born too. And, all the relatives that are still back there, and being able to connect with them and see pictures. And I used to say, did you know so-and-so got married? I said, yeah, I saw their pictures on Facebook. And that always kind of blew her away, and I think she felt kind of like she was sort of out in the cold, because not only did I hear that so-and-so got married, but I saw the wedding pictures before she did, and this kind of thing, But for her birthday and that kind of thing, she loves it when I put pictures and a video on Facebook, because she gets all these responses, and she likes that. guess that's something that we all kind of like. Is through Facebook you'd get recognition that you wouldn't get anywhere else from, maybe coworkers or friends or family members. You could get that on Facebook a lot of times. You could get approval. At the very least, you could become acknowledged. That used to blow me away that for my birthday, I get all these birthday wishes. People can really get caught up in that. Like I said, when I think back to where I was in 2007, it's easy to see why I did. It was the perfect thing for me at the time. Like all the nuts, the icing sugar that I left behind. Now, Linda, she always says, well, I never believe anything I see on Facebook and blah, blah, blah. Which is funny, because she's always showing me something. Says, see, I saw this on Facebook, and she's on there all the time. She has a tendency to give me a hard time about it. She's on there every day, all the time. She stays in touch with the kids that way. We do belong to some local groups. Every town in the city has these local groups. The town I live in has lots of them. It's crazy. This group and that group, and they're all kind of the same. A lot of some of it's good, but there's also a lot of bitching and bellyaching. I think that's one thing about the internet that kind of irks me is people are very brave on the internet. They can say all kinds of things because they know they're miles away. The person they're talking to is way beyond their keyboard. I always say, if you really want to say that to me, if that's how you feel, ring my front doorbell and say it to my face. At least have the guts to do that. But don't sit there and snipe at me behind your computer. I see a lot of that on Facebook, especially these local groups. People are very critical of their neighbor. Well, if you're critical of your neighbor, you go next door and tell them how you really feel. That kind of thing. I like the Facebook Marketplace. That's very handy. My buddy John told me they have a dating site. I didn't know Facebook had a dating site. Excuse me, I guess I could use that years ago. But anyways, he's on there. He's met a few people. So hopefully that's going well for him. But the whole internet thing is interesting. It is. It's really interesting. Like I said, I don't see Facebook. I don't view it the same way I used to. It's no longer my friend or my buddy. I use it. But there's nothing wrong with being on there. But I just don't chat with people I don't know anymore. I'm not looking to chat with people. I go on there. Like I said, if I see that my friend and her husband have gone on a cruise, like recently, this co-worker, my ex-co-worker, she's retired too. Her and her husband went on a cruise to the Panama Canal. So of course I was liking all the pictures and I commented. And I remember about a year ago when Linda and I were going to Greece. They had gone to Greece prior to that, and I sent her a message and asked her, about anything that you want to tell me about Greece. That you want to share with me, or stuff like that, right? But that's really the extent of it. But it's very cool connecting with people from friends, that's my Facebook video. I hope you found that interesting. I thank you for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you in my next video. In the meantime, look after yourselves, look after each other. Stay amazing in the land of awesome. Feel free to comment. You want a shout out, hit me up. Try and give me as much notice as possible, okay? Okay, you look after yourselves. Take care, and we'll see you next time, okay?